Well, good morning. Welcome to everyone. Greetings to those joining us at the 01, Crossroads, Highland Park, Vernon Hills, at home, wherever. I hope you all had a good week. Some of you, it's May. May's the new December. Very busy, lots of travel, commencement. If you were among those who sort of walked across the stage and moved to tassel, congratulations. I spent the week with 40 pastors studying the book of Revelation. It was a long week. So I mentioned, 6 months ago that I was sort of looking ahead and saying, wow, I've been saying for 35 years, I'm going to preach through the book of Revelation. That's coming. And I realized, I gotta sort of land this plane here. I signed up for this workshop, and people flew in from all over the country, all of us ostensibly getting ready to preach through Revelation at some point in the near future. And so we had a scholar in there, a guy that had written 6 books on Revelation, a seminary professor, and so we spent 10 hours a day for 4 days, sort of going through the crowns and the horns and the trumpet blasts and the red dragon and the numbers and the 7 eyes and all that stuff. So anyway, exhausting week, but I am looking forward to that series. Starts in the fall. So we are in Psalm 120. This is a psalm about trust, and I don't need to tell you that we have a trust problem today. When I was 30 years ago, when I was working as a management consultant, all the business journals were talking about trust and the need for trust and the speed of trust and trust is a competitive advantage and how to build trust in your teams and all of that. And it was interesting to read that and to read those articles and to reflect about that. More recently, our discussions about trust are much more about society. There's some recognition that society, in order for things to work, like we have to just trust that other people have a certain set of convictions and that there's certain rules and there's certain understandings of how things are going to operate. But we have this decline of trust in the major institutions. People don't trust government, they don't trust the media, they don't trust higher education, don't trust whatever, don't trust the church, don't trust science, don't trust the courts, don't trust the elections, don't trust all these things. There's just this decline of trust, and trust is sort of to a culture, to a society, what oil is to an engine. I mean, it just keeps things moving forward. So there was a study, it's famously cited all the time these days, that in the 1960s, when they asked Americans, how much do you trust the government to do the right thing, or how much do you almost trust the government to do the right thing, however they worded it. Like, I really trust it, or I'm pretty confident that the government will do the right thing all the time. And in the 60s, it was like 85% of Americans said yes. And today, the statistic is 15%. And of course, you have to decide whether or not you trust those statistics that I'm sharing with you. And we have to figure out if we're going to decide to trust the media to report on trust in the media. And you have to decide whether or not you're going to trust me to report these facts or this data or these claims to be accurately. So there is, when these discussions happen, you also generally hear that, well, trust in, and right now it's trust in small business is strong. Used to be, just a few years ago, I read an article, trust in small business and in the military and in the Supreme Court is high. But now I go back to those same studies and they're just saying, no, trust in small business is high. And pastors have taken a shellacking in the last 20 years. So trust in pastors is way down. We're now behind nurses, pharmacists, high school teachers, military officers, and judges. I'm happy to report we are ahead of journalists, business executives, members of Congress, and the perennial lowest rung on the ladder, used car salesmen. So today I'm going to argue that these challenges of trust are not new. that trust was an issue 3,000 years ago, but it was different in this sense. The discussions back then are not whether or not you can trust the Supreme Court or trust the elections or trust whatever. The question is whether or not people would trust God. Do I trust God? That is the question for you to wrestle with this morning. Do I trust God? Do I trust in His goodness? Do I trust His love for me? Do I trust His word? Do I trust His promises? Or do I believe I sort of know what's best for me? Even if it's not what He's telling me to do, that I somehow know better. The life we are called to live is impossible without a high level of confidence in God and His word. And trusting Him is, let's be clear, it's not easy, or it's not always easy. We need to understand that the challenges of trusting God come when we don't want to trust Him or when we are in a crisis. And the fact that we trusted God yesterday doesn't mean that we would trust Him today. It's not a one and done decision. Romans chapter 12 sort of famously refers to us as being living sacrifices. And of course, the problem with a living sacrifice is that they're always crawling off the altar. So we have to crawl back on and surrender again. Trust demands millions of decisions, not just one. And the second thing I want to point out here is that trusting God is hard because it comes when we don't want to trust Him. There are times, and I think we want to move into this direction, where trusting God actually makes good sense and it's our default. We're not even thinking about it because it's just there and it shapes how we even view the situation, but it's hard to get there. So we don't know who the author of the psalm that we're going to look at is. Some suggest that it's David, maybe. The attacks that are being leveled against whoever is writing this are against his reputation. People are lying about him. And he's very frustrated about these lies and about the assassination of his character. And he is very hurt by this. That certainly would describe several situations for David, principally when Saul is trying to kill him. And Doeg, the Edomite, is the guy that David thinks is continually undermining him. So you might remember David gets tapped to be the next king when he's 15 years old. But he won't become king for another 15 years. Saul will be king for the next 15 years. Saul knows that David has been tapped to be king. Saul wants to kill David. And so David has 15 years where he's on the run. He's trying to stay away from David, trying to kill him. And there's a couple of famous situations. 1 Samuel 24, Saul is in a cave. And he's surrounded in this cave by his guards. So the king would sleep in the center of the circle, and all the guards would sleep around him, so you couldn't just get to the king without getting past all the guards. And David goes into the cave, and he cuts off part of Saul's robe. And then he goes out, and he stands, ways away, and he goes, "Look, if I'd wanted to kill you, I was there, I could do it." And Saul goes, "Oh, you're right, I'm sorry," and he leaves. And then 2 chapters later, he's trying to kill him again. This time, David goes in, and he goes into the center of the camp, and he takes Saul's spear. And then he waits until Saul wakes up, and he says, "Saul, my king, I'm not trying to kill you. Here's your spear. If I wanted to kill you, I was right there, I could have done it." And but Saul continues to go after David and makes David's life very hard. And David is convinced that this guy Doeg continues to say to Saul, "He is trying to kill you. Don't be confused." So whether that's the situation or not, we don't know for sure. But what we do know is that this guy who's writing this is under attack, and maybe you are under attack. Maybe somebody is lying about you. Maybe somebody is undermining you. And how is it that you're going to respond? So, if you have a Bible, you can turn to Psalm 120. And as you do, let me remind you, the Psalms is this collection of 150 poems. It's in the middle of the Bible. Some of these poems most of them are prayers, some of them are meditations, some are long, some are short. They break out into a bunch of different categories. There's Psalms of praise and Psalms of thanksgiving, and there's Psalms of lament and imprecatory Psalms and penitential Psalms and messianic Psalms and royal Psalms. There's all kinds of different Psalms. We, in this series, are looking at the 15 Psalms between 120 and 134 that are unique because they were set aside to be the Psalms that people were singing when they were ascending to Rome. So as they are marching up, not to Rome, to Jerusalem, as they're marching up to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is 2,700 feet above sea level. It's there high on Mount Zion. And as they are climbing this mountain, they would be singing these psalms. And there's a play on the whole idea of them being psalms of ascent, because you're ascending to Jerusalem, but you're also metaphorically climbing towards God. And these psalms come in a variety of different shapes, but they are important, and they're important for us because they remind us that lots of people are not willing to make the climb. So spiritual growth is not our default mode. Like, that's just staying where you're at. If you're gonna ascend, right, there is work to be done. Now, we cannot change our heart. We do not have the ability to sort of change who we are. But we can do these things that God invites us to do. We can make these decisions, and as we do that, the Spirit of God changes us, and we become more like God, more like Christ. So I said last week, we are pilgrims, not tourists. And so if you think you're a tourist, if you think that you are at church as the audience, as opposed to understanding that you are the worshipers, you are the congregation, you are here to be trained to go out and love and serve other people, then the whole general framework that you're moving through life with is not the right one. So I went on last week to argue that it's important that we curate the playlist that we're going to listen to. It's important that we pick the podcasts that are going to play in the back of our mind. It's important that we pick the songs. We don't just defer to the algorithm that's going to feed us whatever it wants us to hear. And so these psalms were deliberately chosen by the people to be the psalms that they were going to be singing as they climbed towards Jerusalem. So I'm reading now Psalm 120. It sort of breaks out into three little sections here. It's a short psalm, breaks out into this instructions to trust God during times of trouble, and then a reminder that God is going to judge the wicked, and then finally the promises that things will change, that God will win, right? That this goes in the direction that we want it to go in. Section 1, verse 1. I call on the Lord in my distress. Okay, so right away we can see the psalmist is in trouble. I call on the Lord in my distress. And he answers me, save me, Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. So there's nothing particularly happy about this psalm. It's not a fun psalm. It's not even a beautiful psalm. Some psalms are laments, but they've got some very powerful sort of melancholy language or turns of phrases that are that grab us and move us and capture us. This is not that, and it's a psalm in which it's going to open talking about distress and it's going to close talking about war, and so it's a little bit distressing. It's not, to be clear, it's not a psalm I would have chosen for the march up to Jerusalem. I haven't walked, to be clear. I've always been in the car. But I have made this trip, and I'm always amazed, like, wow, it's a long way up a steep hill to get there. One of the first tours that we had of Israel, I remember So Jerusalem's up the top of the mountain. At the bottom of the mountain, in the Dead Sea, the Dead Sea in the Jordan River Valley, in the bottom of the mountain, as a matter of fact, at the lowest place on the planet, not covered by water. So the Jordan Valley here, where the Dead Sea is at the bottom of it, that is the lowest place on the planet. It's hot, hot, hot. So the air, the lower you go, I looked up, why is it so hot? The lower you go, the more the air is compressed. You just don't get breezes, and it retains heat. And so it's like, it was like 108 degrees when we get down there. And you go down there in order to get in the Dead Sea, which is fun for a few minutes. The Dead Sea is 30% salt, so the ocean is like, what, 3% salt? I think Salt Lake is like 12% salt. And the Dead Sea is 30% salt. So you walk out in water about this deep, and then you lay down, because you float on the Dead Sea. I mean, you cannot not float. You float on top of this water. And so that's sort of fun, and you could, read the paper, and because you do nothing, you're floating there. So you're there, but it's 108 degrees. So after a few minutes, then everybody gets out and starts to cover themselves with the mud that is around the Dead Sea, because you're so hot and you're just trying to hide from the sun. And then you clean off, and you get back in the bus to go back up now from the lowest point on the earth to 2,700 feet above sea level. And I've mentioned it's hot. So you get on the bus, the hot bus, and the bus driver does not have the bus, or just has the air conditioning on briefly, but then as soon as you start to leave, he turns it off, because he says, there's no way this bus can climb up with the air conditioning on. And so I'll just say that the pilgrims in the bus are usually not happy on this climb. And they're yelling to turn on the air conditioning. And the bus driver is saying to me, I cannot turn on the air conditioning and keep the engine on. So I would not pick a sad song at that point. Like, I would be trying to encourage people. But that's not what we get here. What we get here is a psalm in which the psalmist is very frustrated with life. And he is calling out to the Lord. And one of the first things to see is he's very frustrated. He feels like he's being attacked unjustly, and he is calling out to God. So the question is, when you are frustrated, what do you do first? Do you complain? Do you catastrophize? Do you yell at somebody else? Do you just decide you're going to fix your problem? Or do you pause, if only ever so briefly, to bring your problem before the Lord? So this is instructing us to bring our problems to God. So you know what it's like to be lied about. We've all been lied about. People have misled others about us. And it's very frustrating. And our self-defenses kick in pretty quickly. And I just want to note, this year I had two friends who were being attacked in the press. And this happens now in the press. It happens in social media, right? There's all kinds of different ways that someone can be saying things about us that we don't like. And with one of these guys, it went on for months and months and months. And I would talk with him every week. And we had a Zoom call. And I spent my time, saying to him, look, first of all, you think everybody's talking about this. I'm here to tell you, nobody is. Like, nobody's paying attention to this. Like, it's your world, and you think everybody is looking at you and talking about this. I'm just here to tell you, not happening. Everybody's got their own problems. They're thinking everybody's looking at them. I say this to people at church all the time. People are like, I can't come to church because I've got this problem or I got that problem. I go, well, I got news for you. I don't know if it's good or bad. Nobody cares. Like, they got their own issues, and they're thinking about their own issues, and so, just show up. But I also spent time trying to persuade this person that he couldn't swing back. He said, look, you can tell the truth, and you can find ways to say the truth, but you cannot seek revenge. Like, you cannot do that. That is to destroy yourself. And it is not what we get called to. And so, there's a number of passages that talk about that we need to leave all that to God. Leviticus 19 and the book of Proverbs, Romans 12, and the example of Jesus. Right? So Jesus will come out swinging when he sees somebody, when he sees the poor and the oppressed and the widow and the orphan, and he sees people being excluded. He will come to their defense. But Jesus doesn't defend Jesus. Like, when people are coming after him, he doesn't fight back. In fact, he prays for them. Lord, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And he is our example. And so what we get here is this call to trust God when we are under attack and to not seek vengeance. By the way, if you want to live in an eye for eye community, then eventually everybody ends up blind. Right? That's what happens. And so, save me, Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. Then we go to the second part of this, in which the psalmist is reminding himself at the same time as he's talking to the person that's attacking him and telling what's going to happen. What will he do to you, the he being God? What will he do to you, and more besides, you deceitful tongue? He will punish you with a warrior's sharp arrows and with burning coals of the broom bush. So if you read a bunch of different translations on this, you see that the arrows get described as being sharp arrows, being deadly arrows, being warrior's arrows. There are all these different kinds of arrows. And that's generally, when you see that happening, that's just code for the fact that the translators don't have an immediately obvious word to use to bring it into 21st century language. So these arrows were arrows that were shaped by this broom bush, by this juniper bush, and it's a hardwood, and it burns very hot, and the charcoal stays hot a long time. So what they're being said is that they're taking these arrows. God is going to shoot you with arrows, and of course God doesn't miss. So this is David or whoever saying, here's what's going to happen to you. You are attacking me, and I'm not going to attack back, but God will defend me, and he's going to shoot at you with arrows that have white hot embers in them. So you're not just going to get shot. You're going to get shot, and then you're going to have white hot embers inside your wound. So these are not nice words that he is saying. He is saying, God will vindicate me. And then we move into the third and final section, which is a reminder that this world is not our home. And he's frustrated, but he's going to start to state his frustrations and then reposition this. So it starts, woe, the Hebrew word is oi. You maybe have heard somebody say, a Jewish person usually, oy vey. And it's like, woe is me, woe is me. So, woe to me that I dwell in Meshech, that I live among the tents of Kedar. So these Meshech and Kedar, they're not regions, they're actually people, but they're people that we can identify with the region, and we know what that region was like. So Meshech, he is with a group of people who get described in extra-biblical material as being barbarous. We know that they trafficked in copper and people, which means they were traders of slaves. So these are not nice people. And then Kedar is a place that's 1,000 miles away, actually. So he's not saying, when I dwell in the tents of Kedar, he's not saying literally I'm living around these people, because it's 1,000 miles away. He's taking a statement today. It would be like, yeah, I'm staying amongst the Hell's Angels, and they're bad and they're loud, and I can't tell them to be quiet, and nothing is working. My life is miserable because of where I'm living. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. Now, the word here is shalom, so this is peace, not just in not war, but it's a holistic peace, like a flourishing, right? So, too long I've lived among those who hate that. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. So He's tired of living among these people. They're not fighting fair. They're attacking him. They're evil and wicked. They're lying about him. So what do we do with this? What specifically do you do with this? Well, look, the specifics vary. I'm not sure what you're facing right now. I'm not sure. Maybe you are under attack. Maybe somebody is lying about you. Maybe somebody is misrepresenting you. You're facing troubles. One of the things that I want to say to you very clearly is that you need to turn to the Lord, and you need to not punch back. In fact, let me just make this a little bit harsher. So this is not simply that we need to not envy the wicked. That's Psalm 73. There's this famous psalm where this person says, I'm in a bad spot because I envy the arrogant. I envy the wealthy. I'm looking at their life, these people that don't love God. They're not giving their money away. They're not signing up to serve. They're not going to the end of the line. They're not saying, I need to get smaller and elevate the needs of other people. They're not thinking that way. They're like, me first, this is what I want. And I envy those people because it looks like their life is working. And so that's Psalm 73. This is one step beyond that. This is saying, I'm not punching back at people who are punching me. And this is very radical to hear this. Now, I just said Jesus doesn't defend Jesus, and he doesn't, and we need to not take revenge. Let me say this only makes sense if we trust God's promises. Right? This only makes sense if we're living today in light of eternity. So, studying the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is not what many people think it is. There's actually not a lot about prophecy. There's a lot about obedience. There's a lot about Jesus. There's a lot about worship. There's just a lot of things that people don't understand. But the first word in Greek, not in English, but the first word in Greek in the book of Revelation is the word apocalypse. And people think apocalypse is the end. It's all about the end of the world. And so that's the way the term gets used today for the most part. I mean, there's lots of movies that are about the apocalypse, and it's all about the end, the end, the end. But that's not what the word apocalypse means 2,000 years ago when it's used in the Greek. It means unveiling. It means peeling back the curtain. And so what the book of Revelation does is it says, look, I'm gonna show you what is really happening, and I'm gonna show you what's really real and what's ultimate and eternal, right? And so you get to see the world and parts of the future from God's perspective. And you see what matters and what doesn't matter, and you go, oh, okay. Well, in light of that, this is the kind of person I want to be. What is my next step? What could I be? I could, in this situation, choose to be faithful. I could choose to be like Christ. Now, that may actually cost me, but not in eternity, right? If I'm living for today, if I'm living for the next 10 years or 50 years, I would make very different decisions than we get called upon, invited upon, to do if we're going to live forever. So I've said this many times, I'll say it again. If what we see is all we get, then following Jesus is a bad plan. Like, if this is all there is, if what we see is all we get, then following Jesus is a bad idea. Because you're giving your money away, you're giving your time away, you're serving other people, and you're saying, I am investing in another kingdom that will come and that will outlast this. I would suggest that Nietzsche is a better guy to model yourself after if what we see is all we get. Then what you want? You want power. You want your way. You want people to serve you. I mean, that's what you want. If what we see is all we get, then be a disciple of Nietzsche. But if you believe the promises of God, that he is going to bring a kingdom, a world that works, and we're going to live forever, and you live very differently today. And in the face of this kind of injustice, you seek to protect the weak, and there's issues of self-defense, and there's times to state the truth. It's complicated, but seeking revenge is not a way forward. And we've got to understand God will right the wrongs. And I cannot sacrifice my character and get pulled into these eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth battles. Being wronged is an opportunity to take some of the anger out of the system. We need people taking anger out of the system. We need people returning evil with good and trying to help us move forward. So as I processed this psalm, and I wrote this sermon 3 or 4 months ago, and it's sort of disturbed me ever since. The question I asked was, do people think I trust God? Like Cherry, our boys, neighbors, the staff, do they say, yeah, Mike trusts God? Or would they say, Mike trusts Mike? And I truly believe that I have a high level of trust in God for things that are down the line, important things like eternity, but it's hard to trust in the immediate things. And I think this is a call on us. And I'll just say this. So I went back trying to figure out, what does it look like to trust God? What does the Bible say it looks like to trust God? And one of the people that gets a lot of credit for trusting God is Daniel. And you've got some famous situations in which Daniel trusts God. And ends up in the lion's den at one point. But when you go back and you read that, there's one verse about Daniel in the lion's den, trusting God. But you got chapters leading up to that in which you're seeing the character of Daniel. And what I took away from that was just this recognition that trusting God is perhaps much less about the moment than it is about all the development to get there. And it's about understanding that this is a pilgrimage and that I'm marching forward, and I got to train my heart, and I got to think about what's on my playlist, and I got to do the right things so that when I get in that moment, I will do the right thing. There are moments when we clearly know we're trusting God or not. Peter steps out of the boat, to walk on water when Jesus says, when Jesus is there. There's some moments where it's like, it's clear that I'm trusting God. I think we actually want to be in a spot where it's not always that obvious that we're just trusting God, because that's become more of our character and our nature. So, lots of challenges in this broken world to trust, but it is what we get called to here with somebody who is having a rough go of it. I'm going to close in prayer. Let me remind you all again that these Psalms are part of curating a playlist, of memorizing Scripture, of listening to the things that are going to build us up, that are going to push us in the right direction. So, Lord God, we thank you for Psalm 120. We thank you for these Psalms of Ascent. We thank you for the examples that have been set before us that we can read and reflect on. We confess that we often simply go our own way until that doesn't work. And then we want you to rescue us. We want to develop a character and a lifestyle that's different than that, where we are living with the veil pulled back and we're looking at what really is ultimate and is going to matter. And Father, we pray for your help and guidance to that end. In Christ's name, amen.